If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
The planet is only 6 months away from total civilizational collapse. Already in most areas of the world, what civilization was built is collapsing. It's being done by design.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it. And he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
If we act quickly, it can be averted, it can be changed. But you notice the talking point out of the EU.
The European Union and its member states were the driving force behind a number of landmark agreements reached in Sendai, in Addis Ababa, in New York, and in Paris. With the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals.
The talking point out of the UN.
The Commission today called for accelerated implementation, so essential for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of that 2030 Agenda, as well as other achievements called for by internationally agreed development instruments.
The talking point out of AOC.
The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it?
The talking point out of Beto O'Rourke.
Is our final chance. The scientists are absolutely unanimous on this, that we have no more than 12 years to take incredibly bold action on this crisis.
Is that the Earth will completely be uninhabitable and that we will all be dead within 12 years. Now, you understand, they didn't just cook that up. They are purposefully engineering this situation as it begins to unfold. We have a chance to A, blame who's behind it, and B, stop it. So we sit here and we laugh at AOC, and we laugh at Beto, but you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that if you go watch my film Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, 2007, I have the quotes and the video clips of the Bilderberg Group, the UN, all of them saying that.
The Bilderberg-dominated Club of Rome advocated environmentalism as the best front to implement population reduction. Western populations would accept serfdom if it was packaged as saving the earth. Citizens would more willingly give up their national sovereignty if it were sold as a way to help the planet. And the Club of Rome has been aggressively pushing a global carbon tax as a way to fund their planetary government.
Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the Third World. Henry Kissinger, 1974.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world. Now, none of this may succeed this time, but this to me is sort of the outline by which someday, in the next few years, a solution will emerge.
I have seen that in many countries, in fact, this process is already on the move. Yeah. Almost everybody is mobilized on this process. And what is important to highlight is also the fact that there is a larger set of organizations, groups, professionals that are all interconnected and positively interacting with the UN.
That they're creating a planetary crisis that by 2030, remember there's Agenda 21, that's from 1992 in the Rio de Janeiro. And then they now codified the UN a couple years ago, Agenda 2030. So this is a real globalist plan. And they are carrying the plan out. Now, humanity is fighting back. And many intelligence agencies and militaries around the world have gone and looked at these plans. They've decompartmentalized, and they realize that they are taking part in the post-human system that's being built.
What does it do when you get 120 of the most powerful people in the world getting together to have meetings with government officials? I mean, that's amazing.
Well, it is what I mean is that they're planning the corporate agenda. They're not planning the democratic human journey agenda, in my opinion. Mussolini had a definition, is when the interests of the corporation take completely over from all other interests, and that's fascism.
He said it should probably be called corporatism.
Well, call it corporatism, call it fascism, call it neo-lib, there's a whole variety of political words, depending on which side of the stripe you come from, to start with, which describes the thing. But what they are describing is the complete end of democracy, the end of what matters to people, the end of what happens to the human journey. And for that reason, I think this is revolting.
And they said the way to have a final monopoly of control is to end the family. And so once they'd done that, this is a fact, they could really start dumbing people down and really start destroying people's roots and really start then preparing to decrease the world's population. But first you want to flood the first world with a giant bloom of the third world to bring the first world down. Then you release a bioweapon that culls large amounts of the population, and you tell them that it's a naturally occurring weapon or that terrorists released it, and then everybody's got to go into these highly controlled, compact police state grid cities for their, quote, safety, and then that allows, over time, the social engineering to get even more draconian, and then basically they'll release bioweapons so deadly that only becoming basically artificial humans will allow you to live in the new environment that they are creating.
Stop enslaving us. Stop setting up tyranny. Stop going along with the New World Order plan if you've got any soul left.
Since you are able to edit out all the stuff you don't like, I can speak honestly. I don't expect that we're going to avoid collapse. The planet can support something like 1 billion people. I mean, we could even have 8 or 9 billion probably if we have a very strong dictatorship. And we're now at 7, so we have to get back down. That's what lies ahead.
Earth's ruling elite believe they have discovered the fountain of youth. But before they can attain it, 80% of us must die. A psychopathic technocracy is establishing world government so there can be no escape from their plan.
The New World Order is the old world order. I mean, it's just the names have changed, the appearances have changed.
Most people have no idea. They're not after money. They have all the money they need. They're after power. That's their aphrodisiac.
And one is that Hillary apparently won the vote among the public. She had slightly more votes than Trump. Yet he got more electoral votes. So one obvious change that should be considered is to abolish or to change the system of the electoral college. It seems to be totally outdated.
I've really got to hand it to the globalists. They have stuck to their plan. If you go back to the mid-1850s, British scientists, in fact, leading scientists of the day, like Galton and, of course, Wedgwood, Huxley, Darwin, envisioned a planned world controlled by a scientific elite. Malthus, more than 100 years before them, had also developed a similar plan. And they have been developing it and refining it ever since. And you can read the books that they wrote about their plan. Galton envisioned computers and the double helix of DNA and the science of biometrics and developed the system of eugenics based off Plato's writings from thousands of years before to set up a planned technocracy to control every facet of human life, carried out by a very tiny scientific elite on top. And the British Empire by the 1850s was the dominant force in the world, and they needed systems or sciences of population control, so they put the equivalent of trillions of dollars today into funding these sciences. And though these sciences were anti-human in many ways, you have to give them credit that many of the modern sciences we enjoy today were developed through their labors. A lot of people ask me, Alex, how did you know all of this? Are you psychic? And I explained to them again, have you watched the film? It's video clips, it's film clips, it's newsreels. Going back to the 20s and 30s, where they were admitting all of this. Pre-Hitler, eugenics and this new science-based control of human procreation, compact cities, you name it, was accepted by the public because they believed anything scientific must be good. Hitler's plan for living space and the final solution, admittedly, came out of the Cold Springs Harbor Rockefeller Foundation program in New York and was transferred in the 30s to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and was the map for the Nazis. IBM's Thomas Watson and thousands of IBM engineers ran the Nazi war machine and the Holocaust. And to understand the system we're going into, it's important to listen to Aldous Huxley, whose brother ran the United Nations and the UNESCO program for 3 decades and is the father of the transhumanist program and the former head of the World Eugenics Society, Julian Huxley. Both men wrote books. Julian Huxley wrote nonfiction, and Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, wrote predominantly fiction. And Huxley gave speeches before his death in the early 1960s at Berkeley and other colleges, which you can find online, where he admits all of this in hour-long and hour-and-a-half-long speeches.
Compare the parable of Brave New World with another parable which was put forth more recently in George Orwell's book, 1984. I'm inclined to think that the scientific dictatorships of the future, and I think there are going to be scientific dictatorships in many parts of the world, will be probably a good deal nearer to the Brave New World pattern than to the 1984 pattern. They will be a good deal nearer, not because of any humanitarian qualms in the scientific dictators, but simply because the Brave New World pattern is probably a good deal more efficient than the other. That if you can get people to consent to the state of affairs in which they are living, the state of servitude, the state of being, well, it seems to me that the nature of the ultimate revolution with which we are now faced is precisely this, that we are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy, who have always existed and presumably always will exist, to get people actually to love their servitude. People can be made to enjoy a state of affairs which, by any decent standard, they ought not to enjoy. And these methods, I think, are a real refinement on the older methods of terror, because they combine methods of terror with methods of acceptance.
Then he said, by the year 2000, it will be evident that this was not fiction and actually a fictionalized account of what we're actually intending to build. Shortly after my film came out in 2007, Barack Obama got into office, and all of a sudden, the eugenics program and the technocracy program, not just here in the US, but globally, went from being secret or restricted and not for public promotion to suddenly being pushed everywhere. There were shows about the world after humans, how great it'll be, and how horrible humans are, and New York Times bestsellers about how a wonderful plague would come and kill everybody, and how humans are parasites, and professors were lauded and praised who gave speeches about airborne Ebola killing 90% of the population and how 12 monkeys needs to become a reality. Suddenly, Ray Kurzweil said, we'll soon merge with machines. Everyone else will be like cockroaches. You'll assimilate by the Borg, or you will be basically destroyed. And now, They have MIT Magazine. They have the Davos Group. They have, almost on a daily basis, Wired Magazine, all the modern intelligentsia groups who went from saying I was insane and none of this existed and it was fake news and it was made up and it was conspiracy theory to rolling it out because they're so close to their program being completed. They're pushing this officially. Taxes by the mile, not being able to have a car, only getting meat once a year, the government telling you by high school what you're going to be when you grow up. Total centralization.
I'm V. I'm looking forward to showing you around Plandopolis today. Are you ready to go? Have you got your calorie card open on your smartphone? I registered your visit with Slick Travel Corp the other day, so they've allotted you a journey time to match mine. It makes so much sense, doesn't it? We're so lucky. Our kids were allocated a school quite near my practice, so I can drop them off on the way. It saves on our calorie ration. Well, it won't be long until the little darlings get their career announcements. They've been working so hard, so I'm sure they'll get something good. Not that there's anything wrong with fixing carbon scrubbers for a living or anything. Right, what's on the menu this month? No, not meat. It's not your birthday. The Global Food Council are doing a really good job of keeping food production going. I mean, you don't get the choice you used to, but we're better off than most. I think it's probably easiest to walk from here. You barely see a car in the city centre nowadays, unless you're rich. Oh, the state knows they just aren't practical anymore. We're all trying to meet our global carbon deal. Electric bikes are so much better for getting around our neighbourhood. And why waste valuable space on car parks when you can use them to grow food?
That's why Huxley's book, Brave New World, and his nonfiction book, Brave New World and the Visitor, are so important. Because he tells you this is the real world. The cloning, the compact cities, the coffin apartments, the government drugging everybody, starting at age 3, which they're now doing with Prozac-type drugs. The total control, the breaking up of men and women, making everyone look the same. As professors are now saying, oh, it'll be great when we all look the same. This is the killing of the individual, forcing us into Plato's cave again, forcing us into a controlled reality. And the allegory in the George Lucas film with Robert Duvall that came out in the early 1970s of Duvall escaping the robot sentries, which they admit they're setting up for real to oversee us now, and coming out onto the surface and seeing the sun and the larger world is a rebirth of Plato's allegory. This is so incredible, folks, and it's what my film Endgame barely in 3 hours scratches the surface of, but still is the most cutting-edge film out there. I want to challenge all of you to realize that when they tell you this is by 2030, and they're saying no one has a car, no one has any type of freedom, you're totally controlled, but it's great to be poor, classism has ended. Here's the problem. They're not going to ever get rid of the ultra-rich. That's why Obama says you can't have a car, you can't have air conditioning to Africans. He's teaching them to be austere and to be poor so the globalists can have all the resources.
If everybody's raising living standards to the point where everybody's got a car and everybody's got air conditioning and everybody's got a big house, well, the planet will boil over.
They don't say we're going to innovate better science and cleaner burning systems into the future. They don't say we're going to go to space-based colonies or undersea colonies. No. They just simply say you can't have wealth. You've got to take the job we say. You've got to go into a caste system, all for the greater good. They write white papers admitting in the 60s and 70s that they would sell this as being cool, as being trendy. They make chains fun. So now robots will decide what you eat. They'll go to the store. There won't be any job for you because the world's being designed where humans aren't involved in any of the industry. This is a total checkmate so the globalists can dictate the terms of our surrender. Ladies and gentlemen, you think about how everything I talked about 20 years ago has pretty much come true, or they're now announcing it now. And I always wondered how they would respond to us is they launched their final program and then everything we've said has been proven correct. Their answer is censor us. And now the EU says shut off InfoWars access on Facebook, Twitter, Google, and in Europe. Now they're saying it in the US. Now NPR, CBS, CNBC, they're all saying shut me down because they're scared, folks.
The right-wing smear machine has gotten Alex Jonesified.
1776 will commence again if you try to take on firearms.
Jones. That man is Alex Jones.
He's one of those guys who believes that Bigfoot was responsible for 9/11.
I heard it on Alex Jones, so I know it's true.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones. Alex Jones.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones.
From InfoWars.
InfoWars.
You watch InfoWars?
InfoWars.com.
Infowars.com.
InfoWars.
InfoWars.
Bill Clinton is a rapist. InfoWars.com.
Bill Clinton is a rapist. Infowars.com.
Bill Clinton is a rapist.
That's according to website InfoWars.
InfoWars. It's a radio show hosted by Alex Jones.
Alex Jones, nice guy.
InfoWars.com.
InfoWars.
InfoWars.
InfoWars. InfoWars.
What's happened with InfoWars? I would love it if you would follow up also about Alex Jones and InfoWars.
Alex Jones obviously is a well-known conspiracy theorist whose brand is bullying.
You didn't call me to testify in America. I have a right to face my accusers. And you, Congressman Deutsch, are a liar and a fraud.
I know we had Alex Jones in the room earlier promoting conspiracy theories.
We're talking about Alex Jones, and the fact of the matter is that the companies that allow people like him, conspiracy theorists, to be able to purvey lies have a responsibility.
InfoWars founder Alex Jones is calling out alleged collusion between Google and Democrats.
Shame on the mainstream corporate media for not defending the First Amendment.
InfoWars just lost their war on info. Yesterday, Apple,
iTunes,
Vimeo and Spotify,
YouTube, Twitter,
and Facebook have all blocked Alex Jones and InfoWars.
Who is the most banned news network in the world?
InfoWars comes to mind.
Alex Jones, which has now been taken off of Facebook, thank God.
CNN waged a long campaign against Jones. It worked. Jeff Zucker silenced and deplatformed his show. It was a stunning defeat for free speech.
I've asked globalists in off-the-record conversations, why, and some on air, why they're doing this. And they say, because the public's too dumb. We told them what we're doing in our own publications. Then we tell them in the public publications it's not true.
Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost different species. A revolt of the plebs would become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton. Bertrand Russell.
H.G. Wells, Aldous Huxley, Bertrand Russell, and hundreds of other eugenicists constantly bragged about how the establishment believed themselves to be a separate, more advanced species than the common man. Top eugenicists were bold enough to admit that their real goal was not improving the heredity of the commoner, but to further dumb them down so that they could be more manageable. Nobel Prize winner Russell wrote at length about how vaccinations filled with mercury and other brain-damaging compounds would induce partial chemical lobotomies and develop a servile zombie population.
Diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable, and any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Bertrand Russell.
Over 100 years ago, eugenicist social planners said that they'd use mind-altering drugs to control the population. By 2007, more than 20% of the U.S. population were on some type of prescription antidepressant. Take action and defend free speech and retain your humanity. Technology's great, medicine's great. That's all things that fellow humans innovated and created. That's why humans are so great. They're telling us humans are crap, that humans are obsolete, that the future doesn't need us, that we're in a post-human world, and they're doing everything culturally they can to make us unhealthy, stupid, lazy, and dumbed down, to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. That they're just restoring balance and making humans go through rites of passage again, that we don't just deserve to be given all this largesse by our ancestors, that we must first go through competition with our fellow men, ascend as the starmen or astronauts, go forth on the human-made craft of our own technology to space, face AI that's going to try to kill us, overcome the AI, and then interdimensionally travel to a new level of consciousness and be reincarnated as a star child or the Lucifer force or the Christ force and brought back to planet Earth. Now, before the mainstream media attacks me and says that's my weird delusion, I'm quoting you from deep research, the secret doctrine of the globalist, who envisioned all this over 150 years ago and are now manifesting it. And then, of course, Arthur C. Clarke, Sir Arthur C. Clarke, OSS, MI6, inventor of the telecommunications satellite, one of their top futurists,
sat at the feet of H.G. Wells, one of their other top futurists, and the head of the Fabian Socialist Society. He basically, before he died, wrote letters and gave speeches admitting the Luciferian ascension of 2001 Space Odyssey. And of course, in Childhood's End, he really gets into what they think is really going on. And that's why they have top billionaires and top globalists coming out saying, oh, this is actually a virtual reality of some evil entity that's controlling us, but we're real, and we're going to build new artificial realities and invite you into those. Literal matrix, see? We are releasing the information. We've reverse engineered the globalist operation. They didn't even hide it. And we are presenting to you here in a clearly understandable, not hidden way what's happening. We're taking the occult or the hidden and bringing it out to light. I hope you listen. I hope you get involved, and I hope you choose free will, and I hope you choose to follow the God that made us in his image, Jesus Christ, and not the fallen god of this world.
What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. Prince Philip, reported by Deutsche Presseagentur DPA, August 1988.
In 1998, Ted Turner pledged to give more than $1 billion to the United Nations to be spent in the implementation of population reduction policies planet-wide. In 1999, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave $2.2 billion to Planned Parenthood, the United Nations Population Fund, and other population reduction groups. By 2007, the Gates had given more than $30 billion, almost exclusively to population control groups. The controlled corporate press cynically reported that the Gates were giving the money to help third world children. Bill and Melinda Gates were dethroned as the world's most generous philanthropists when their friend and fellow population reduction enthusiast, Warren Buffett, gave $37 billion to fund an army of population control groups.
And I actually think the world will be much better when there's only 10 or 20% of us left. Dr. Eric Bianca.
Is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
The growing human population. Because if where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Can't you guess?
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff.
Now to a dire warning about climate change.
A dire warning.
A dire warning.
A dire warning.
Dire new warning. Dire warning.
Another dire warning. The situation is dire.
A dire warning.
Dire consequences.
A dire warning.
It sounds dire. What prompted this warning?
We have a global emergency.
It's here, it's man-made, and there are going to be dire results.
The government issued its most dramatic report yet about climate change today, and it came with a dire warning.
A stark warning.
A warning to humanity.
An existential threat to human civilization on this planet.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
And we, the scientists also tell us, have 12 years in which to answer that question. 12 years within which to act.
The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change.
We have 12 years to turn this around.
By the year 2030, that's just 12 years from now.
The future is closer than we think and is not good.
There will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Time is running out to prevent global warming from reaching a catastrophic milestone.
Sea levels rising.
Extreme droughts.
Severe storms.
Widespread fires and extreme flooding.
Dangerous heat waves. Rising sea levels
and forcing millions from their homes.
Crop failure and mass population movements.
As well as food shortages.
Millions around the world face future disaster.
Pretty serious.
People are dying.
President Trump has frequently doubted its existence and has called it a hoax.
I don't believe it.
The world is going to end in 12 years.
The scientific community released a report that proves, beyond a doubt, that the Earth is getting warmer. This global warming is caused by things you grown-ups do, and by the things you don't. If drastic measures aren't taken soon, by the time I grow up, there won't be any fish left in the sea. Rainforests and clean air will be a thing of the past. The polar ice caps will be gone, oceans will rise, entire countries will disappear. Life will change in ways you can't even imagine. There could be famine, worldwide epidemics. Life expectancy will be lower. And we're not just talking about the future. We're talking about my future. But this is no surprise. You adults have known about this for years. And though you could have done something about it, you haven't. You can say, it's not my problem. You can say, I won't be around in 50 years. But from now on, you can't say I didn't know. Starting today, the lines are drawn. You have to choose sides. Either you're for my future, or you're against it. You're a friend, or you're an enemy. I may just be a kid today, but tomorrow will be different. This is the last time I'll be talking to you adults. You've had your chance to fix this problem. Now we have ours. We won't be cute, we won't be patronized, and we will not be denied our future.
Climate deniers, his word, and energy CEOs belong at The Hague with 3 square meals and a cot with all the other war criminals. What's your thought on jailing skeptics as war criminals?
We'll see what happens.
I suggest, therefore, that this be solved not through a democratic process. That would take too long and devour far too much of the funds to educate the cannon fodder, unfortunately, which populates the earth. We have to take almost an elitist program that we can see beyond our swollen bellies and look to the future.
It's my understanding that back in 1997, when you were vice president, Enron's CEO, Ken Lay, was involved in discussions with you at the White House about helping develop this type of policy, this trading scheme. And is that accurate? Is it inaccurate? It's been reported.
I don't know, but I met with Ken Lay, as lots of people did, before anybody knew that he was a crook.
Right, and clearly you can see why so many of us are concerned about this type of cap-and-trade energy tax that would be literally turning over this country's energy economy.
I didn't know him well enough to call him Kenny Boy.
Well, but you knew him well enough to help devise this trading scheme.
Receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.